Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher, and our channel is Scientology Peeling the Onion. I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing today, Janis?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good, good. Well,
Why don't you
g'day,
tell everybody what we're
everybody.
doing? Yeah.
Yep, g'day. Today, we're going to have Stu Moreau back on. Stu, I've known for 54 years. He left the Sea Org in 1980, and I hadn't seen him for many years until about 2 years ago, though we'd been in touch over the years. And 2 years ago, he came to one of my reunions, and then I went on when I did my road trip with Cheryl. We stopped in and stayed with him for 3 days, and we went and visited St. Augustine and different places in Florida. And then he went on a cruise with me and 13 other friends, where we went to Portugal, old stomping grounds of Stu's and mine and a couple of other people. So we went to Lisbon, Canary Islands, Morocco, and Spain. And now he's agreed to do a series of interviews with me of the different adventures and what life was like in the Sea Org and how he got into Scientology. And we're just going to have fun with this and see where it leads as to what's happened over the years.
Okay. Well, without further ado, then let's bring on Stuart Moreau. Hi, Stu. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I seem to be off to the side. Am I okay like this?
Oh, yeah, you look fine.
You're good.
Okay, all right.
Stu, I was just going to say, hey, Stu, how do you do?
I'm good. How are you? Yeah, from the last one.
That's great. I just was going to mention that Stuart, we already did one interview with Stuart, and there were various comments and questions. And Stuart would like to make a brief statement before we get started. So go ahead, Stuart.
All righty. All right, I'm going to make a real short statement here. To complete the story of my old high school friend Charlie, who got me interested in Scientology when we ran into a guy selling info mags on the corner of Haight and Ashbury in 1968. It was a proverbial fork in the road. I took one path, and some months later, I found out Charlie had unfortunately died of a heroin overdose. So in a sense, I suppose Scientology could be called a life-saving choice for me. I left the Sea Org in 1982. I've had little contact with Scientology since. I have occasionally kept in touch with old friends, both in and out. The best reg on the planet, my old friend Dave Foster, has several times tried to get me back online, even offering to put my supposed freeloader debt aside. Circumstances and hard-headedness have kept me away. From my marriage to Joan in the Sea Org, I had two sons who are in Scientology, whom I have a good relationship with. Want to show the picture of Joan?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I just got to pull it up here somewhere. Hold on.
It was pretty hot back then.
Yeah.
All right.
And my mother my mother married you and Joni.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, yeah, there she is. That's a nice. That's kind of fuzzy, but All right. All right, already. Oh, I can keep going. Okay, I'm well aware that I am putting my good relationship with my two sons in jeopardy by being friends with Jan in the crowd here. I do not do that lightly. The main reason I am here is to help my friends on both sides by advocating for more connection, not less. The rapid rise of the new religion of Scientology is fraught with many mistakes, but overall, I feel Scientology is a force for good. I would like to see families reunited unconditionally as soon as possible, not years and years. That whole thing needs to be cleaned up quickly. I would, I knew Shelley quite well, and I would love to see Shelley and Leah friends again and hugging on TV. Wouldn't that be nice? Scientology can be a very useful tool. You can pick it up and use it anytime. As a tool, you control it. It does not control you. I'm proof of that. Gains I made have stuck with me for 56 years. I'm a very successful old guy. In fact, I've done a lot of research into healthy aging, real scientific paper research. Not that I wrote, that I studied. And I wrote all that up in a website because a lot of my friends were asking about it. And I have that available. I don't make any money off it. It's just a website. You guys can put that up later if you want. But anyway. Over the last few years, I've studied a lot about God and forgiveness. I think a lot of love and forgiveness needs to be injected here. I also think the Sea Org needs an easy exit strategy. Sometimes these very powerful volunteers just want to do their own thing. People change and things change. People leaving should be helped and encouraged to become ambassadors for Scientology rather than problems. Like when Candy wanted to leave and LRH encouraged it. That was a tape you guys did a few days ago. Lastly, I told a little fib about my renting. I'm actually living for free at a friend's house that he's not using and won't for a while by the beach here. After the last divorce, last May, my 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath house that I had built sold. And since then, I've been traveling a lot, visiting family and friends like Jan and other people. And, before too long, I will buy or build another place. It's easy for me, even at 73. I'm financially independent, meaning I don't have to work at a job. When I left the Sea Org, I decided I wanted to become financially independent through real estate, a goal I have accomplished 3 times since then. Why 3 times, you ask? Well, the answer to that lies in that Jimmy Buffett song, Margaritaville. There's a woman to blame. Well, but I know it's really my own damn fault. Anyway, on that light note, let us continue with the adventure.
Okay.
Great. Sounds good, Stuart. All right. Well, we're going to carry on with stories about when on the last video you were in Los Angeles and you were in the Sea Organization was it on the Simon Boulevard? That was the ship?
On the boulevard, yeah.
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 Well, that's on the Apollo when I got married with Joan.
I know. I just wanted to show a picture of you.
That's basically, that's me, young Stu. All right.
Yeah. So the last story you told, you were in the boat and you ran out of gas, and Pat Broker had to come out in another boat and get you some water.
Well, okay. Since then, the only other stories I wanted to mention about being on the boat was, we did the sea trials. I just did a sea trial quickly, but there was a girl that came on board, because this is a cool Scientology success story. And she had just had 4 teeth pulled on the one side of her mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can hear okay?
What's wrong, Janis?
I lost all sound. Now it's back again.
Oh, it must be bump some on the keyboard. I'll get rid of it.
No, I can hear you. I can hear it. Keep going, Stu.
Okay. Anyway, so this girl came on board, and she was one of the crew, and I was the auditor guy, right? Because I had done the Dianetics course, remember? So they said, Stu, you got auditor. She just got these teeth pulled, 4 teeth from one side of her mouth. And the Novocaine was just wearing off, and she was starting to really feel care. And so I just, I got her in session. And within about half an hour, she didn't take any kind of drugs or anything. The Novocaine was wearing off. That's the whole point. Within half an hour, she was laughing about the whole thing. And it's just kind of one of those unbelievable stories you hear about every now and again in Scientology, which was really cool. And then another one is, Hannah Eltringham. She's kind of a big deal. She was class 8 and all that. She showed up on that boat one day and gave us some kind of briefing. And I was really smitten by Hannah. I'm this young guy, and she shows up. She's all in her uniform, all tight and cute, and she got the little hat on, her little curly hair sticking out the side. She had those little pouty lips, and I'm going. And she's so much, she was so focused and there, and she was briefing us on something. I'm sitting around the table going, man. Anyway. I had a
no, she's very beautiful. I mean, she was, at a young age.
She was very young. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, what were you, an 18-year-old or 19 at the 19, time?
Yeah. I was 19. She was probably turning 20 by then. No, 19 still, because when I came to the ship, I was still 19. That was in 1970. That was right after this. So anyway, right after that, they needed to have an auditor on the ship, so I was chosen to go to this annual special briefing course at ASHO there in LA, which I must have done for some months, but because I did, I think I got my grade auditing there and stuff. But Ann Taskett was the flag recruiter, and she just rolled. I was doing really well in the course. I was a good student, and it was easy for me, that stuff. And so she said, "Hey, you want to go to flag?" And I said, "Well, hey, yeah, work with Hubbard, sure, you know." And I zipped off, and then you know, a couple of days later, I was over there in you know, the adventure began on the ship there. You know, I arrived.
Where did they fly you to? Or do you remember
Well,
how you
I
got
think
there?
I flew into Barcelona and then to the island of Madeira, which is just this, they call it the Pearl of the Atlantic. I don't know how to exactly pronounce it in Portuguese, Pearl de Atlântico or something like that. So there it is off the coast of Morocco, but it's a Portuguese island. It's where Madeira wine is made. That's the only place in the world, Madeira. And there's the island, and then Funchal is on the bottom there, and that was the port. It's one big mountain coming out of the ocean there, and I think there's a road going all around. I think on one lead we went around on the Liberty we went around it. But so and then the port there. So I arrived, and it was right around Christmas in 1970, and you know how it is on the ship on Christmas. It's just one big party. I think I arrived right after Christmas. I forget exactly, but a couple days later, because for New Year's. One of the really cool things about Funchal, and this I'm just this 19-year-old kid, and this is like all this international traveling stuff was really cool. But what they do, see, that's a big mountain coming out of the ocean there, and it's kind of flat in Funchal, but Funchal is mostly that's the port, is mostly like hills also, but it gets very steep around there quickly. And what they do is they send off these Disney-style fireworks on New Year's there.
Oh yeah,
So
Janis mentioned that before.
Yeah, it's a real tourist attraction for the cruise boat. So I'm pretty sure the ship had to go to anchor because of that, because the cruise ships had priority and stuff. And so we had this spectacular display going on and stuff like that. And I had gotten you know, I got a shore leave. Took a day off, and I was all dressed in my suit and stuff like that, or my jacket top, but coming back, we had a really bad storm blowing, so everybody was supposed to go back to the ship. This was the story I was going to tell about the sea sled, right?
Right.
And do you want to show that sea sled just to show?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now.
Yeah, they were not very seaworthy boats, but I think they were ordered before I got on board by to be built as a sort of a big. See, they're kind of big, and you could easily fit like 10 or 12 people in that.
It does look like a sled.
Well, it is.
Well, it is, and it's total flat bottom.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they had a plow front, you know, like a rounded front. You can see there. It had three 2x4s across the bottom of it, and it was just plywood, you know, like 1/2-inch plywood. But plywood's pretty tough, and it was, you know, it was put together good enough. But in that storm, we came around that. And I'm brand new on the board on the ship. I had been assigned to the deck crew, but I was assigned as bosun. I'd only been there a couple of days. The boatswain is the guy kind of in charge of painting the ship and taking care of rigging and stuff like that, and you know, painting and things. And so I was on the boat when we were coming back, and as soon as we rounded that breakwater, the waves were bigger than the boat, and so the way that sled is, it kind of would scoop down, and we were scooping water. Now, you know, it was kind of, and there was a lot of people on board because everybody was supposed to go back because the storm was kicking up, and you know, they didn't want people stranded ashore with the storm going on. So Peter Warren was the most senior guy in that load, and it was pretty packed up. There was 10 or 12 people in there probably. And there was a tarp in there that was used for covering and he says, pull the tarp up, because we were getting rained on and sprayed on and everything. I thought, I was questioning that in my mind. I'm going, is this a smart idea? We all had life jackets on and you know, but we were heading back to the ship and scooping all this water. So by the time we got back to the ship, and show that picture of the ship again with the boat.
And Stu, everyone is dressed in their Sunday best for Liberty.
Yeah, we're definitely not dressed in working clothes. That's for sure.
I'm pulling up this.
Right.
You had a suit on or a suit jacket.
Yeah, my nice looking suit that I had custom bought in LA, but just the top of it. But
I'm almost there. Hold on a sec. I'm having to jump around. Oh, here we go. Okay, I got it. This one here.
Yeah. See, you can't see it very well, but halfway through there is a boarding door at the B deck, which is where that says aft well deck. That level of portholes there is the B deck, and there was a door coming in B deck there. There was a normal.
Were those the cattle doors?
No,
No, that's lower. That's
Okay,
lower,
okay.
a deck lower.
Okay.
They used to have cattle doors on below the well decks. They used to have doors that would open up right into the B deck hold, but those got taken out when we went to dry dock that last time. They were welded over because they were just a pain in the ass, and water used to spray in them but they were very convenient for unloading cattle in cars and stuff like that. They just open up and they could drive off rather than having to use the crane to unload stuff. But anyway, so I believe the passengers were let off at the B deck door. And then we backed up again, and we were going to pick it up because there's a little crane back there in the aft well deck. And my good buddy, Larry Frazier, who was an old Navy guy, but he was also brand new on board, and that was the first time he'd run that crane. Paul was the first mate, and he was off, but he should have been there for that. But anyway, so since I was a deck guy, and they needed some guys down in the boat to hook up the lifting gear, I got assigned to the front end of it to lift it up in my friggin' suit, of course, and everything. And so I did the hookups, and there was about 6 inches of water in the bottom. So now you got to remember, you got to imagine there's waves that are coming along. See that long thing? It's unusual on a ship called a rubbing strake, which was a big bumper about this far built out. It was built out of hardwood with 3 pieces of half round metal bands on the outside. And that was because it was really designed as a ferry boat, a ferry boat to go between Belfast and Ulster, I think, over there in Ireland. And so it was an overnight ferry, and it would dock and undock a lot. That's why it had an aft whole steering thing, so they could just go up the river and not have to turn around to go back out. And so the waves were coming in at least as high as that rubbing strake, up and down. You know, they were high enough that the propeller in back of the ship was getting exposed by that point. So he's trying to lift this thing up as the storm's worsening. And we had the water in there. So a wave come up underneath it as he was about to lift it, and lifted it up, and then came out from the front side and smashed down like that. And the 2 little lifts, which were under design, I didn't know any of this at the time because I'd never been involved in the boat at all. You know, like later I became an expert at all this stuff, but I was brand new on board, like I said. But and I didn't know what happened, but basically the bolts ripped out of the bottom, or partly ripped out. They were still connected because the plywood doesn't really rip that easy, but it will tear. Okay, so the water was just pouring in at that point, and so the thing's filling up. And we couldn't really pull it up at that point. We're trying to figure out why is the water coming in, and nobody really knew. But those 2 bolts underwater had ripped partly loose, the big washers. They had washers about this big underneath, and that had all ripped through the 2x4 and the plywood, and was filling up rapidly. And so he couldn't really pick it up anymore. And by that time, it's all the way up. The top of the rails is called the gunnel. On a boat, that's the gunnel. So it was up to the gunnels in water. You know, everything's underwater, and we're all sort of, me and the other guy. You know that guy who was back there, was that good-looking deckhand guy. Anyway,
Good looking.
in the back, I forget his name. But anyway, we were down there, and then by this time, I think you said LRH and them all got.
Well, right? Captain Bill jumped in.
Well, that was a little bit later still. I mean, yeah, soon after that.
Yeah, because when the Commodore and I came down, Captain Bill was in there.
Oh, okay. Right. I think, Bill was a pretty fearless guy that would do anything. And he just took off his jacket and just climbed down and got in there with us and stuff. But yeah, I worked a lot with Captain Bill on the ship.
That's Captain Bill there.
Yeah, I was a deputy captain under him. I covered for him when he was on leave once and stuff. That was like a little over my abilities at the time. But anyway.
Covering captain.
Yeah, but I was the guy. Bill, you know, people say they didn't get time off, but he made sure he got his 2 weeks every year. He just did, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of Captain Bill.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, Captain Bill had come down and was down in the sea sled with you guys when the Commodore and I came down.
Okay.
Janice, where were you guys, the Commodore and you, LRH, where were you guys at? If it was
we were on the poop deck at the very back where it says stern or poop deck. That's where the Commodore and I were, and they were down in the water right by the propellers of the ship, and we were dragging anchor in the storm.
All of the above. Anyway, what happened is they were trying to pull us up, and we were kind of close to the well deck for most of the time, but we were slipping back because the current was also flowing. But what would happen is the boat would go way down, and then it would hit that friggin' rubbing strike on the way up and get all twisted, and it started breaking up and stuff. It was really getting worse and worse. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the kind of the circuit that happens when you're out on your own, and you get used to handling it. On a ship, you have to handle everything, and sometimes stuff happens, and that is the nice thing about working on a ship is you become very able to achieve, and you know how to get things done. Well, that's one of the reasons.
A high demand. In other words, you deal with it. It's like you have to confront things and get them done, right?
You're on your own with a little crew, and anything that happens on the ship, if there's a fire, if there's a medical emergency, if somebody needs to go to shore for something, whatever happens, you get a hole in the side of the ship, damage control, you have to do everything. And so it's
life or death.
Yeah, and we did a lot of drilling, and the ship, for a bunch of, what you might call some people like to call a motley crew and think it's a bunch of yahoos just running around with their heads chopped, like chickens with their heads chopped off. The Scientology Sea Org people get very, very efficient. You get a focus group of people who are able to accomplish a lot, and you get a real bond too going when you're in that kind of thing. And that's a lot.
How did it get solved? How did you get aboard, or what happened so it didn't sink?
Well, so this is going on for a while, and we were drifting a little bit back, like Jan was saying, and it would come up and hit the rubbing strip and then go down and hit the prop on the way down. So we were getting it from both ends. It was kind of a hairy scene, and we're kind of hanging on for dear life. And I'm not especially scared or nothing. It's just what's happening.
You weren't kind of hanging on for dear life. It was hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
It was a life or death matter.
So I think somebody came up with the idea of trying to get straps around, but we wanted to salvage what was in the boat and get us out. And so it was pulled along to that B deck door. We eventually got us down to that B deck boarding door. And somewhere along there, and like I'm sort of floating along and swimming along in the water, somebody threw a life preserver down, so that we have something to cling to besides just our life jackets. And it hit me in the head. And they were not soft life preservers. They were old cork ones from 1936. They didn't have foam rubber back then, And it kind of grazed my head a little bit, so I was bleeding as well. And so by the time we got to the doors there, I got relieved because I was bleeding, which was, and I just kind of shook it all off and got in. And somebody put a blanket around me and stuff. But eventually they ended up putting some canvas straps, like wide straps around it, and getting it back and slowly picking. They took the engines off to salvage them, which they did. The engine room guys rebuilt them and fixed them.
Did they lift the sea sled up onto the aft well deck or whatever to repair it, or where?
Well, it was sent to shore to rebuild eventually. That's where
it was kept.
Pardon me?
It was kept on the aft well deck. We had two sea sleds.
Yeah.
Both were parked next to each other on the aft well deck. And when this one got broken, yes, it got shipped off to get repaired. So we then only had one sea sled until that one came back.
Can I ask Janis a question? How did LRH or Hubbard find out about that? Or what was he doing? Was he issuing orders from up there, or were you guys just watching this?
Yeah, no.
Or what?
No, somehow we were told that there was a problem with the lifeboat, and we were dragging anchor, and he was actually heading to the bridge when we saw this. And so we went to the poop deck, and he and I were looking down at this whole disaster down there of the sea sled. It's just full of water, and they're trying to bail the water, and they're trying to walk it with a rope around back to the crane. and Hubbard was yelling down at Captain Bill, and that's when Hubbard turns to me and says, "We're dragging anchor. I've got to get to the bridge. You are responsible for every life in that boat."
How old were you then?
How old were you?
I was 13, 14.
Yeah.
So a little bit older than this picture here.
I was about that age.
And you rose to the occasion and made sure nobody died, right?
I absolutely did. And I remember yelling down at Captain Bill, who was refusing to put a life jacket on. And I remember yelling back at him, he was to get a life jacket on right away. And at which point we will pull the boat around, but everyone needed life jackets. So he finally complied and put it on. And
Wow.
then we got it around and hooked up to up by the crane and up on the deck.
Yeah, yeah.
At which point my job was done, and I could go back to the bridge and report that the sea sled was aboard and everyone was safe.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
Except for Stewie bleeding.
That's how LRH used the messengers. Is he had so much stuff going on that he had people as eyes and ears, and that's what you guys were trained for, right?
But
Yeah.
imagine a 13. I mean, Janis, can you imagine John, your son John, or your daughter Erin at 13 being able to do something like, or giving him that responsibility?
No, I mean, I couldn't even when they were 11, which was the age I went on the ship. I remember looking at them and going, "What were my parents thinking?" You know, but you have to rise to the occasion because it was life or death.
Yeah.
Right.
And see, I would have liked to have been in your shoes. Believe me, I would have. It was just one big adventure, and I'm just a kid, and that's, I was always wanted to be. I mean, I grew up in San Francisco. It was a beautiful city, but I couldn't wait to go out to the country and have some adventures and stuff like that.
Well,
Yeah.
let me break in just for a second before I just started to interrupt. You can hear this story and many more in Janis's book, Commoner's Messenger, Book 1, A Child Adrift in Scientology Sea Organization. That's the cover. That's Janis around the age of this story, and with L. Ron Hubbard when she was one of the first messengers. And you can order, just go down below. There's a link you can click and you can get an autographed copy of the book. So if you're interested, that's where you can get it. I'm sorry, I had to put in a little plug for Janis. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Now, that's a heck of a life Jan had. Growing up. It's like, I know people get uptight about these kind of things and stuff. It's like, imagine if you were working beside somebody like, let's take a mild one, Muhammad, over there creating the Islam religion, back and riding them horses and, uniting them tribes in the desert, and you were side by side with somebody like that, or, Buddha giving all the lectures or whatever, teaching people how to become spiritually free. It's or any kind of big hotshot executive thing, like working alongside somebody like Elon Musk or somebody like that, or Patton, or,
Stu, let me ask you a question. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Janis. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was going to say I definitely had an adventurous life, and I don't regret it.
Oh yeah.
No.
But I wish it was different, but I don't regret it.
Right.
It couldn't have been any more exciting, that's for sure. I mean, all we hear on this is glory stories, I mean, glory
I was going to ask you a question.
Glory days stories. Stories about glory days.
Right.
Stu, I was going to ask you a question.
Won't put
So this was the first time. This is the first time you saw Hubbard on the ship. Was that incident?
I don't think I was looking at Hubbard when I was down in that boat.
No, I didn't think so. You're home for dear life, but I understand that.
I did look up and see Captain Bill. He was on the B-deck aft looking down on the rail, and then I remember him coming down and getting his.
I know you mentioned before you don't remember the first time you interacted with L. Ron Hubbard, but can you give us a story about, around that time period that you do remember?
Well, it might have been because I rapidly moved up to first mate. I didn't have a run into him very much, but when I was walking by, in fact, Steve Nichols was behind me, and oh, sorry, that just didn't come to me the first time. I probably just ran into him frequently on the decks, and we just hello, sir, and stuff like that. It wasn't, I had a lot of respect for him, but. And he was the boss and he was a cool guy, but I wasn't overwhelmed by his presence, or like a lot of people say, oh, it was really, in fact, I was a good translator in the years to come, because people did get nervous around him, and I would try and I was like a good expediter between him and whoever he was working for, which I'll tell you some more stories later. I worked really closely with LRH when we were at WHQ, and
later on in the years.
On the ship, it was the decks. I'd see him once in a while, and I was a grungy deckhand, kind of thing. I did get kudos for the ship had just come down had been involved in a pretty bad storm, a hurricane-like storm for the last month or so up in the Azores areas, and I think in Cadiz or somewhere like that. You guys were traveling between all those areas, and it was pretty rusted up on the front. It looked pretty ugly. And since
there's a picture of that, Mark.
Which one? The front?
The ones of the forecastle. There's 3 of them to show the shape it was in when Stu arrived, and then its improvements. Yeah,
it was like all rust streaks around the anchor, and just
this
pretty
is after, right? This is before.
Yeah, that's in between. There's another one.
Yeah, that's
all right.
There we go. It was pretty rusty there, but the side was really, really bad also. But the thing is, and that was under me, the painting and stuff. So, and I had learned how to paint on the Boulevard from Alan Long, actually. He used to be a painter, but he was a Navy guy, and I think he was captain for a while when we were.
Yeah, he was.
He was a really cool guy. And, I learned about ship painting from him. And so I just got the rollers. We had the paint there and everything. And I painted all that outside of the ship up, made it look really good. And LRH had commended me in the orders of the day for doing all that. It wasn't a thing he had to order or anything like that. It was just done. He went out there and looked at it. So, and then, but anyway, that was maybe the first time he noticed me. I don't know. But anyway, Can I ask you,
Stu, as just a practical question with a ship like this and salt water, were you guys constantly having to keep ahead of the paint and the rust and all that?
And it was kind of like that guy, Pat, you just mentioned, Pat McCauley, and also Rudy for a while were on this. They had a job called Pinhole in charge, because the theory was that anytime there was a rust streak, it was because there was a little flaw in the paint, which was a little pinhole, and they had to grind it down and paint it and all that stuff. A lot of times I didn't.
Chip.
Huh?
And chip at it with the little rust hammers.
A little what?
The little rust hammers, or the hammers to chip away at the
that's
rust.
if you have heavier rust, yeah. But this is just a pinhole. It's just a place where the paint has a flaw, and it makes a big rust streak. And of course, they like to do everything pretty thoroughly on that ship. I guess LRH came up with this pinhole thing.
I'm only bringing this photo up to show this is one time when the ship was being painted. And do they treat it for rust and everything beforehand? Is that what the procedure is?
When was that job there? I don't remember that one.
This job was when the ship was getting ready for selling it. So this would have been 75.
That was after I left already then.
Yeah, but they chipped it all the rust and scraped it off, and then they'd paint it with red lead over the bare metal, and then white paint.
Yeah. Red lead was a primer they used. I think it actually had lead in it back then. Maybe not by that time. So I didn't do all that fancy stuff. I just painted over that. I cleaned it and painted it, and that was just to make it look good. And then the next guys. I had guys working for me after I became first mate. We had a guy, John. You remember John, who was the first mate? What was his last name? He was a Scottish guy. And then Wally Burgess was the chief officer.
Oh, John Stevens.
He was Irish or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got I was very young and kind of hot-headed and a little competitive with him, and I don't know. I kind of wish I was more cooperative with him at the time, but Wally was the guy above that, and I got on really well with Wally Burgess. Wally Burgess was he was a glider pilot during World War II. He used to fly those planes in and land troops, in enemy lines kind of thing. I guess during D-Day or something.
Wow,
maniacal job, huh? Yeah. They would get towed by planes and then just let go, and they would coast in and drop the troops off.
I never did that. Wow.
Yeah, he was a pretty cool guy. So,
what's next, Janis? What's the next?
The next.
I was going to mention, if you bring up that picture that's right there of the forecastle, there is a door to the left, and
Yeah.
that was the deck purchaser's office. Is that correct, Stu?
Um,
That was Rudy's office.
That was probably Rudy's office. The one on the right there that's open is probably the. Now that might have been the bosun's cabin. I mean, the bosun's locker, that where we had ropes and stuff like that. But he
No,
would have
that
had
was
huh? He would have had an
the
office.
bosun's. Sorry, I'll let you talk.
I think what no you that was probably the but that would we would have had a desk in there for him probably, yeah. So that was probably his office. And that door that's open to the right of the mast there, I think that was where the first mates, or sorry, some of the deck guys' cabins were.
Right, you go through that wooden door, and to the right, that was the forward galley. And then to the left, you went down the stairs to the bosun's locker.
Yeah.
And there was a cabin there where Bruce Welsh had been locked up. And then across the hall was another a dorm for deckies. And up above that was the another crew dining room where the Greek tailor, used to do all the sewing.
Okay. And also there was the little engine room. I mean, the motor, the huge electric motor for the winches was in there too.
Right.
Stu, did you live up there? Did you live up there in those dorms?
What'd you say?
Did you live up there in those dorms up front?
Yeah, I did for a while. But that was also where we put Bruce, which was that was my project, Bruce, by the way, which I know a lot of details about that. We'll get into that again later. But that was when I was working as the Master at Arms after my Mutiny comment, which we will get into shortly here, right? Now,
well, I wanted to point out Rudy's office so that you could then go into the story about Rudy.
Well, that's coming up in just a little bit because we had that big. Well, yeah, this ended up as the Rudy story, and I had worked my way up to first mate, and we were in Agadir at first, just before the Rudy story and the mutiny and all that, which was a port that had that was on the bottom, the lower part of Morocco, and it had a kind of breakwater that was very. It was made out of these big pieces of concrete that were probably 6 feet in diameter. I mean, 6 feet that were looked like big jacks, like jacks that you play jacks with. They were that kind of, and they just had dumped them there as a breakwater, but they let the water through a lot, like flow pretty easily. And there was a huge storm blowing, again, another storm, right? And this was about a year after I'd been on board. In fact, it was just before Christmas the next year. And we like to stay in port. LRH liked to stay in port because all the international management was being done. And every day they would send telexes out. I mean, you didn't have, stuff like we have these days, internet and all that. The telexes were what they did. And then there was a telex. Right. We didn't have, you had to go short of that. That was I think Rinder was one of those guys that was a telex kind of guy, or in that messenger, that unit. But sorry. So we like to stay in port. Now, all the others, it was storming so bad that all the other ships left the harbor. There was maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of them. They all left. It's just, it was too rough in the harbor to stay in there, so they went out to sea. But we're in the port there trying our best to keep the ship kind of stable, and it's going back and forth with the surging and stuff like that. And the wire, there's 2 kinds of ropes on ships. There's either these big fat ones that are synthetic, or nylon's very heavy, and the more modern version is called polypropylene. And it's usually woven into 8 strands, and it's big and fat like that. One rope like that can hold 50,000 pounds, and or 50 tons or something, like a lot of weight. And I knew the wire rope, but we had wire ropes, which were kind of small like that, and the drums were really designed for that. They were about 1/2 inch in diameter, but they were very old and rusty.
Yep.
We needed new ones because every now and again one would break anyway. But in that storm, that's all we had, except for one that I managed, because I knew we needed new ones. And with financial planning, it's always a pain in the butt trying to get anything through financial planning. And I had been working to get these ropes for months, and I had one brand new one. And so those were surging back and forth, and these wires started snapping like crazy. When it takes a lot of weight, even for an old wire, if it's 10 tons to break something like that, and that's a lot of, it's dangerous. If somebody's in a line of fire, they're going to get cut in half. So it was getting pretty dangerous there, because we were snapping them wires pretty quick. And so finally we got the order to go to anchor. And and again, he wanted the ship kind of stable so people could work and stuff. So that ship had an aft anchor and 2 bow anchors. And so you can put all of them down, and it kind of sets the ship up so it doesn't move around a lot. But again, it was storming out pretty bad, and I don't know how wise that decision was, but we were anchored with 2 anchors down. But the ship was going up and down so hard, we lost the rear anchor. It just snapped off, and so that was another flap. You know, it's just the circumstances. Again, the stuff's all from 1935, you know, and it just is. They did a big flap.
Because then we've got 2 bow anchors, and with the ship turning in the wind and the current, those anchor chains could get tangled up. And so
I don't think we put 2 bow anchors down. My recollection is just 1 bow anchor and 1 stern anchor.
Right, but when we have had 2, we've had to be careful so they don't twist.
Right.
And then we'd have to use the motor to adjust the ship and make sure it didn't twist. And
anyway, after the storm blew over, you know, the engine room guys were doing diving crews trying to find that anchor. They never did find that anchor. We ended up getting kind of a funky little anchor for the replacement. I don't know if they eventually got kind of a nice one. You saw those anchors on the ship. They were kind of nice looking. I think they were called Danforth. They were pretty cool. But, I mean, they fit in there nice, you know, real ship's anchors. So we stayed around Agadir for a little bit. Then we went back to Madeira. You know, this was, again, probably a year later for me being on the ship. So I was pretty experienced hand by then. And Rudy was a deck supply officer. Now, Rudy was a friend of mine. You know, we were good buddies. I didn't know him from before, but he had been in Scientology in the 50s and knew LRH from the DC days. And when I was down the deck, you know, a little further down the deck, but I saw them meet up, and they just, you know, we just slapped hands. We didn't slap hands, just, you know, grabbed him by the hand. And he said, "Hey, Doc, how you doing?" So I guess they called him Doc back then, and you know, LRH lit up, said, "Hey, Rudy, how's it going?" You know, and anyway, so they knew each other from back then. But Rudy was.
I'd like to point out, Rudy was everybody's friend.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Everyone loved Rudy, and when us kids were learning judo from Andre Tabayoyan, Rudy used to come up and let us practice throwing him, you know, over our hip and over our heads. You know, he was 300 pounds or something like that. He'd come up, we would practice on him.
Oh yeah. No,
hey, that was a good thing for a guy getting thrown around by a bunch of girls. That would.
Well, I tell you, they were really throwing him around. I mean, come on, Rudy was 300.
I'm joking.
Yeah, Rudy was 300 pounds if he did anything. He was about as wide as he was tall. But he did know jujitsu, and we had a couple of guys. We had that guy Ron Loving. He was one of those guys that actually went to the Far East and was like a Bruce Lee guy, had done all those different martial arts, and he was an expert in every one. He used to lead the crew in Tai Chi practice. You know, and that's another story when I became MAA later, is that I had to muster the crew every day and do exercises, you know. But anyway, yeah, we had a pretty good crew, and I was trying to build up a good deck crew. We had Dave Murphy in the engine room, and Dave Murphy was a friggin' organizational genius, if you all remember Dave. He was really, really cool. In fact, I think, you know, LRH wrote these various series like org series and data series and things like that. I think the org series was written based on Dave being so well organized, because the engine room was always a big problem for the ship before, and this was history before I got there. But you can imagine you're in harbor maneuvering and you want to go forward and nothing happens, right? You know, so the engine room is crucial. And Dave had been an old Navy guy, and he was a very smart and very hard-headed and very, he just was very well organized. He established the engine room, all the things that are in policy about that you're supposed to get people and train them and keep them in place. And people loved working for him. Everybody was on a schedule. They weren't overworked down there or nothing. And he had all the crew he needed because the engines were that vital. The decks were kind of vital, but not nearly as vital. But I still patterned my, I'm relatively new to this administration stuff. I mean, it's only the first year I'm there. So I'm singing, I'm buddies with these guys. And I was talking to Sylvia the other day and mentioned this thing about the poof cushion. I mean, the weenie dusting. Do you remember that?
The weenie dusting?
Oh God, that was a thing that I might as well tell this because it's so funny. The engine room guys had this really neat little desk space they had built down in the middle of the engine room where all the guys had a little space and they can do all their paperwork. Admin is a really big deal in Scientology or anywhere. The better your administration is, the better things run. So Murphy used to put some talcum powder in one of these bellows that you use for stoking a fire. They're pretty common over there in Morocco and stuff like that. And these engine room guys would all sit around and he would get this little duster going and you get covered in this cloud of dust basically. And then they would do a roast like you see on TV with these movie stars and stuff like that, a real roast. And they would just tear you to shreds. And it was just the funniest thing in the world.
You mean joke, like tell jokes about the person? That's what you mean.
Yeah. And right? I'm nowhere in that class of being able to say things that funny, but they would come up with, and Stu is, he thinks he's really cool, but really, it's like just things that are extremely funny where it hurts. You're laughing and everybody there. It's just a great thing that one of the things Murphy used to do down there it was called weenie dusting.
Well,
are we getting to the mutiny story?
What?
Hang on. Murph was one of the few people I hated having to run a message to.
Oh, he wouldn't budge for anybody.
Oh, I'd run a message to him, and then while he's answering, I'm like, start spinning in my head. What the hell is he talking about? And how am I going to relay that?
The engineers have this thing, which is baffling them with bullshit, basically. You just make up some...
That's how he was.
Yeah, and that's exactly... They did it on purpose, that kind of stuff. They would just get into some kind... But also, Murphy, it was his way of avoiding having to say, get out of my face. I'm doing my job. That's fine. They were really a good crew down there. And so I was modeling my stuff. I tried to get guys established and stay on post and do things. And, I really cared about what was going on. And I wanted to, make it a good crew. And we did have a really good crew on the decks. You have that picture, right?
Yeah.
Well, we have different pictures of...
Yeah.
Well, I have different ones. I have this one here.
Yeah,
that's Peter Vogading, and that was Derek and Gary, and who's the guy way in the back there?
Pat McCullough.
Pat McCullough, yeah.
Dan Holman in the back, and there's Gary Riesdorf.
Yeah, and then you had that one of Dilts there. Bob Dilts was one of my guys. He was a carpenter.
Well, there's Steve Nichols.
He was a big, strong guy that had been on ships before. He knew his stuff.
Yeah.
How about
and then right there in the middle is Bob Dilts. He was the ship carpenter. And we're showing these pictures to kind of give you an idea how manly the deck apes were. That's what they were called, was the deck apes. Yeah. And they're all pretty buff and
we used to lift weights on the forward well deck and the girls would come down and watch us and stuff like that. We were in good shape. But but it was a good crew, and we practiced the judo. Ron Loving was there, and he was good buddies with me and the guys, and he would show us all these moves and he was really good at that stuff.
Let's move it along a little bit, okay?
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, Rudy had the job of buying the new wires. LRH got hot on it after all the wires broke and stuff like that. And all of a sudden getting the lines replaced became top priority. And so he was given special instructions to get wires, but stainless steel this time, and also bigger, which both of those things added up to be a little bit of a pain in the butt because they were hard to wrap around. Stainless steel is much stiffer than regular wire rope. and they're kind of a pain to wrap around the windlasses up there. But anyway, I don't think it became my problem for long, because soon after that, as Rudy was the deck supply officer, and he was had been doing research, and we were back in Funchal by this time, in Madeira, and he was interacting with the shore people, and he had some samples and things like that. He was about to do it, but Norman came down, and he was all hot and bothered about something. He got in Rudy's face and started. And Norman was a good guy, but my feeling in retrospect is that he's from South Africa. Sorry, go ahead.
Norman was the captain.
Yeah, Norman was the captain. Right.
Norman Starkey, just so people know. Norman Starkey.
Right.
I had been working, I was the first mate under Norman, which is
right.
2 steps down. You got the chief officer, and then you got the first mate in there, right? And, I interacted enough with Norman and stuff. But he was a very smart guy, and but he was from South Africa, and I'm thinking in retrospect, he probably had a little of an inherent kind of racism back then too, and I don't know how that played into it, but he got all in Rudy's face and was poking at him and stuff like that. And Rudy just, he just grabbed him and flipped him around and threw him down on. This is the Mutiny we're talking about now, right?
Yeah, but we must tell them Rudy was a black man. We've never mentioned that. Rudy was a black man, and the captain, Norman Starkey, was from South Africa.
Right, yeah.
Where they have major issues at that time.
Yeah, and even evolved in Scientology, it's kind of hard to get rid of some ingrained attitudes or just the way you grew up, But anyway, it's still, on the ship, there were status things anyway. If you were higher ranked, you could talk any way you wanted to somebody almost, if under pressure, sometimes you're not nice. You got to do something right now. You just get it done, and that it sort of translated into a lot of things on the ship. Shipboard life is generally militaristic, and you're used to taking orders and yes sir, right away sir, kind of thing. All right, so Rudy was not going to put up with that crap, and he just grabbed Norman and did some kind of judo thing on him and flipped him down on the deck, and he had him pinned down with his arms, his knees on his arms, and he had his hand back, and he was about to punch him, and I said, Rudy, don't hit him. And he did stop, and some of the guys might have.
I'm lost here. What was he? Why did he flip him over? What was Norman doing?
Because Norman was poking him and getting in his face.
About what? Just
about
being...
what was going on with buying the cables. Sorry.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really make that clear, but it was a very urgent project to get the cables replaced. But whether we did it that day or the next day wasn't going to make a damn bit of difference, kind of thing. But it's just Norman was hot about it, and he felt like, which he should have come to me and harassed me, but he went right to Rudy and was, what are you doing? What's going on? And not getting it done, and or whatever was going on. I don't know, and so Rudy didn't put up with that, and he just flipped him down on the deck. And like I said, Rudy was a 300-pound black guy, and also knew jiu-jitsu and stuff like that very well. And so anyway, we all got commented from that. Okay.
Yeah. So you're talking Bob Dill, Scary Riesdorf, Pat McCullough, Stu Moreau, all these big guys, the deck apes were all comment because they were all there when Rudy did this. Yeah.
We were in that group there anyway. And we all got charged with mutiny and a couple other things. Now, Carl Rosencrantz, who was a really cool guy, later we became good friends and stuff. But he was the chairman of the ComEv, and a lot of times when you get ComEv, you're kind of like gonna be guilty, kind of thing. Yes.
A ComEv is a committee of evidence where it's like a court martial. They're supposed to review all the information and decide what's supposed to happen to you to correct you on what you've done.
Right. It's sort of part of the Scientology justice system and ethics and all that, and it's a way to supposedly fairly, or the idea is to fairly treat people who have committed some kind of offense, like, and then it's adjudicated how it is to be handled. And then it's part of the Scientology justice system, which LOH worked out over the years. And
okay, carry on.
in that kind of high level stuff, if the boss says is commenting you for doing something wrong, a lot of times that's the way it's going to be found. But so a lot of us were guilty, and three of us were offloaded, me and Rudy and Bob. Now, Rudy and Bob had enough, and they were ready to go anyway. Bob was one of those strong, silent types who he didn't say much, but he had a lot going on underneath. Bob Dilts, and he was a real weightlifter. He was in really good shape, and Rudy was just a big guy who also lifted a lot. But to me, it was an injustice. This whole thing. It was said I did all this, and I was mutinied. And so I wrote. LRH had this thing called a daily report, where everybody was encouraged to report on their production every day, or whatever else you wanted to say. And it was a very smart thing because he kept in touch with what was really going on in the crew. Now, the messengers would read them and screen them and maybe highlight stuff, right? That's what you guys did?
Yeah, we'd go through, and anything we felt important, we would highlight it. And there's times he would just read the highlights, and there's times he'd sit there and just read everything.
Yeah, and this plays in later with the Bruce Welch story too. But so I wrote a DR, and I said, hey, this is a bunch of BS. This is a big injustice going on. Norman came down and got in his face. Rudy reacted. I stopped it. I didn't want to get offloaded. That was the beginning of my Sea Org career. It was just, you just go by instinct kind of thing. And so the next day, in the orders of the day, instead of getting offloaded, he appointed me as master at arms, which is the ethics officer for the whole friggin' ship, right? And I just segued right into it. I didn't miss a beat.
In other words, instead of being offloaded, you were made in charge of all of the
ethics for the whole
and ethics and all the discipline on the ship, right?
For the whole friggin' ship, and I never done admin and stuff like that in my life. But and Andre, who was a really cool guy, but Andre, everybody knows him as a really nice guy, right?
This is Andre Tabioyan. Andre Tabioyan, a really good friend of ours. Anyway, go ahead.
He was the one on the right in that pile there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Right next to Bob Dilts. Yeah.
I think he was Samoan, which are kind of like warlike people anyway.
I thought he was Filipino.
Well, it's the same area.
From the Philippines.
Yeah. But they have a natural warrior. They're a natural warrior instinct if you ever check up on them. But he had been a Marine drill sergeant, which is a really
and that's why Hubbard had him teaching us kids judo. He was our judo instructor.
Right.
That's him on the right.
Andre was like, I don't know why he's got me teaching you judo. I was trained as a knife fighter for Vietnam.
Yeah, he was a
good thing
underneath that little. Pardon me.
I said it's a good thing he didn't teach you that, Janis. Sorry.
Right.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that either. But anyway, he was a really cool, calm guy on the outside, and but inside, and that was he was hard as nails inside. But he was he was the nicest guy in the world. But he and another guy were MAA when I got assigned that, and there was three of us. Now 2 days later, they got busted, and it's just me with a 3-foot stack of papers in my in basket, right? In baskets in Scientology, they're supposed to keep them empty and all that stuff, and usually they're just a little pile of paper, and you just do your daily dispatch stuff, whatever comes in, the news or something. But me, I had, that was one place where everybody that had something to bitch about or some kind of problem or something was going on would send it. And, there was a 3-foot backlog of paperwork to be done. And I'm not a paperwork guy. I don't enjoy paperwork. I never have. But, you just do your job, right? So I had to learn that stuff and do all that. But that was the start of it.
Well, part of your job, everyone who had a knowledge report or a late chit or a non-interpolation chit or things that shouldn't be report, all that went to you.
I will tell you a kind of neat thing that happened is one day the stats in Div 4, which was where they were auditing, the auditing hours were down, and he wanted to find out why. So he sent a messenger down to me, said, I'm challenging you to find out why the Div 4 stats, the auditing hour stats are down. And he's got all these messengers and plus 18 more years of experience than me, right? And I had read the data series, and I was pretty jazzed by them. You said you can think with that stuff. That's pretty cool. You know, you think in ideal scenes and look for things that are departures from that and outpoints and stuff. I got pretty good at it after a while, but it's a really advanced technology as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that he could just sit down and write that stuff up is pretty cool. But anyway, he said he's challenging me to find out, to evaluate why the stats are down. And, you know, I'm doing normal ethics officer type things. I got everybody and hooked them up to the cans and make sure there was no people having weird reads on their meter, and looking for reports and interviewing people to see what's going on and stuff like that. And maybe half an hour into it, he sends a messenger down, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing this." He goes, "Oh, we're way ahead of you." and you know, it went on, and then soon he did find the why, which was that they were graduating all because they had a bunch of students from outside orgs, and they had been graduating. And I don't know, he worked out some kind of handling that probably involved keeping people on the ship longer instead of getting rid of them, graduating them, that I could never execute anyway. You know, that would be way beyond me. But that was an interesting little tidbit. And I did learn eval tech over the years, which played a big role later when I was at WHQ.
Right.
But that was one story from Hermetics, and mostly it was.
I was going to say we're at the end of the hours. Do you want? Is there more to finish with the story?
Well,
Before
I wanted to ask him, as MAA, how did you handle disconnection? Did you have people disconnect? Or if they had a potential trouble source situation, did you have them handle it?
No, mostly what we did is the other part of disconnect is when you have a suppressive situation that you're involved with, you have to either handle it or disconnect. And handle can, if your folks are bothering you about where are you, because you never write us, we don't know where you are, we're all worried. We would just have them write a letter. You know, that's kind of a troublesome situation. It could be, you know, they're being a little controlling or something like that, which would be suppression maybe. But we would just have them write good roads and fair weather type of letter saying, yeah, everything's fine, don't worry about me. We made sure people kept in touch that way and stuff like that. But there was, I don't even remember any disconnects going on, even people we offloaded.
Right.
I mean, a suppressive person declares. I think you had showed me a policy saying they were discontinued at that time anyway, the disconnects.
Right? That's right. Yeah, but at that time it had finished. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned too that Hubbard said that people that didn't keep in touch with their family, they should be assigned a condition of
baby.
Oh.
Yes.
But anyway,
yes, he did.
And you know, we didn't. We had one little kid that was a pain in the butt. He used to. Oh, we can't get into too many stories. But yes, to answer your question, even with harsh stuff, which I can pick up again and tell you about this guy that wanted to do harm to LRH, who was on the ship, wanted to physically harm him, who I ended up offloading. But I wrote to LRH because I was young and I'm all worried about this. I'm going, God, what if this guy does? So I wrote to LRH. Of course, he's been seeing this kind of stuff for 18 years, and I'm not in that position to have that viewpoint. And I said, this guy wants to do some harm to you. And he wrote me back on the dispatch or whatever it was I wrote him. And he said that he couldn't harm me with an axe. And that's my attitude. You know, if somebody is supposedly suppressive, you know, like these things like you're supposedly suppressive, you couldn't harm me with an axe. You know what I mean? It's like ridiculous. And you're not, you're in the position now because you're kind of happened. But anyway, it's unfortunate.
No, I mean, I agree with you. Like, think about it. Janis was made to make sure everybody on that sea sled survived. Okay. In other words, and she did. That's tougher than confronting somebody who you're supposed to be disconnected from. You know what I mean?
And it needs to be handled. And, you know, we're bringing it up. And those guys got to be smart enough to figure this out because it's, again, it's like quitting. It's like getting rid of the RPF. It doesn't look good for Scientology. And it's got to be cleaned up. Right. And the only way it can be cleaned up is by cleaning it up. The solution, the problem and the solution are in the same place. It's like becoming, to put some Scientology's axioms in it, it's becoming theta the solution instead of theta the problem.
Well, and then also too,
Right.
just by pointing it out, the stories about the hole earlier and things like that coming out in the media, they decided to stop that, supposedly the hole, and also the RPF. The reports we have is that they don't have the RPF anymore. And a lot of that came from the outside pressure that was going on with stories on the outside about the abuses going on.
Well,
Right. Well,
And that helps. That's helps. It's all,
also,
it all helps. Yeah.
also, you've got to look at the basics of Scientology was communication, learning how to communicate
right.
and getting barriers off so you can communicate better and study and learn how to communicate. And by disconnecting, you are doing the total opposite of what Scientology was all about to begin with.
Be there and communicate.
Communication. Yep.
100% guarantee you that the solution is more connection, not less. There is no doubt in my mind. That's from also, it's just,
and they'd have less people attacking if they would just communicate.
Yeah. Well,
we're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it there. Okay. And we're going to have Stu back because we've got he's got a long history in the Sea organization and with L. Ron Hubbard and all that. So we're looking forward to those stories and also to talk more about disconnection and connection and things like that, because we want to see changes for the better in regards to that. Anyway, we want to thank Stu for being here. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Click that subscribe button. It helps get the story out to other people. Also, rock slam or like that button, right, Janis? Rock slam the like button.
Rock slam that baby.
I'll tell you about rock slams later.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then if you have any questions, or comments about this show, go down in the comment section right away. Anything you want, we respond to it. And anyway, so you're welcome to do that. If you'd like to support our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link down in the description. Click on that. 5, 10, 15, 1 coffee. Janis and I can share it. Anyway, if you'd like to support our channel, you could do that there. And then the last thing I'd like to say is that if you'd like to become a member of our channel, just click on the join button. And that's another way that you can support our channel. And the instructions are there as far as the different levels and things like that. And we really appreciate the people that are members already. And anyway, if you'd like to become a member of our channel, you can do that by clicking on that join button. Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to say, Janis or Stu, before we end off here?
No, I really hope that the reconciliation happens soon. Yeah. It's necessary for us all, for mankind as a whole. It's necessary for the reconciliation.
Yes, That's it right. is.
Don't get me going again, guys.
All right, okay, all right, great. Until next time.
Until next time, we'll see you all later. Yeah. Bye, Stu. Bye, Janis.